Hey there, my fellow lunatics, and welcome to Dakon's Madhouse. Alright, everybody. Today we are going to be doing the max level rings. So, strap in. This is going to be a long one. Oh my god, it takes so long to do rings. Anyway, alright, let's get started with the rules. Number 1. All items are fully upgraded to level 18. Number 2. I am assuming that the player is at the end game and trying to figure out what is the best weapon overall. Number 3. Different play styles can alter the rankings of various weapons for different people. I try to stay neutral and take all play styles into account. Hopefully, I don't let my biases show too much. And number 4. All items are reinforced, because in the end game, you have no excuse not to keep your gear reinforced at all times. Starting with the S tier. This is the top tier. These are going to be our super versatile items, the best of the best, things that are used in multiple builds. A tier, those are going to be excellent items. Top tier for at least one build, and often versatile, but not necessarily the best of the best. B tier are strong items that you really aren't going to complain about, but they have limited use or are eventually outclassed by other items. C tier, these items are fine. You can't go wrong with them, but you will eventually replace them, or you are going to replace them pretty quickly. D tier, maybe these items have a little bit of a niche use, but otherwise they're really not that useful or worthwhile. And F tier, the item is trash, it's not any good, don't bother using it. So the first ring that we are starting with today is the Ancient Gem Ring, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this one right into C tier. I mean, it's not a bad ring. It's fine for melee, and if you don't have better, then I guess, but at this point in the game, you're probably going to have better. So it's a fine ring. The Ancient Guardian Ring, this one is going into D tier. It is a gimmick ring. It is useful for the damage reduction against bosses build, and that is all. The Atlantean Worm Ring, this one is our S tier ring, the first one that we're going to have, and this is just the best of the melee rings. So if you're a melee person, you're going to want to get your hands on one of these rings. The Black Ring. This is an A tier ring, absolutely. It is an excellent mining and melee ring, and is useful in a variety of different builds. The Bomb Ring, I'm actually going to put this one into C tier because it is your best in slot for any kind of explosive kind of build. And its hit point damage actually isn't that bad either, so it's a useful ring. The Bone Ring, however, is not useful. This thing is F tier. There are better rings for both armor and crit chance. It's just not a good ring. The Caveling Mother Ring, however, I'm going to put into C tier because it's got really solid hit point regen, but unfortunately, that's really all it does. The Clot Ring, I'm also going to throw into C tier because it levels up nicely and it just kind of stays useful for life on hit or melee builds in general, but eventually you will replace it with something a little bit more specialized. The Coral Ring goes into D tier as really the only thing of value in it is the boat speed. Get 2 of those and use them for the boat speed boost. That's all you need it for. The Double Ring, this one is a B tier item as it is a really good general purpose ring, and if you just have some sort of build that you don't want to be switching back and forth when you're doing, mining and general attacks and exploring, things like that, then this is a pretty decent ring for that kind of build. The Flame Ring. This one is up in the B tier as it is the best in slot ring for burn builds. It's actually not that bad for dodge either if you don't have a white glass ring, but it's primarily a burn build ring. The Glass Bead Ring. This one, oh god, I wonder what this one could be. It's an S tier. It is by far one of the best damage rings, and I use it in multiple builds. The Glow Tulip Ring is going into D tier. Now, it is the best ring if you're going for a glow build. But if you're not going for a glow build, and glow builds are just one of those kind of vanity builds anyway, then there's really no point to this ring. The gold crystal ring, however, is an S tier item, as it is the best ranged ring at endgame. It was great at the start of the game. It's amazing at the end of the game. This thing levels up beautifully and is just a wonderful ring. The golden spike ring, this one is F tier. It's just not a useful ring. There's really nothing really good out of it. If you want a good version of this ring, get the polished version. The goldfish ring I'm throwing into D tier. Now, while I love anything that improves your fishing, by this point in the game, your fishing should already be at 100, so this ring doesn't really serve any real purpose. Ivy's ring is next, and this one is also going into D tier, as the ranged attack speed that it provides is pretty much useless in the end game. I mean, yeah, if you've got the slow weapons, then you can get some benefit out of ranged attack speed, but with the slower weapons at this stage in the game, you're going to get more benefit out of boosts to damage or crit rather than attack speed. The larva ring, this one I'm throwing into the C tier, as its only real use is that hit point boost, but it has a really good hit point boost. And so if you haven't grabbed all of the permanent hit point food yet, then this can be helpful until you've finally gotten those last little bits of perm health. The lucky ring, this one I'm throwing into B tier, as this is a really helpful ring when it comes to catching things that you're going to need to catch. And fishing is very useful in Corekeeper. As much as it sucks, it is really useful, and that makes this ring very useful as well. The magnetic ring is D tier. It's a gimmick ring. It's good at what it does, which is bringing in loot from a larger distance. But other than that, it really serves no purpose. The melting crystal ring, I'm actually going to throw into C tier, as it's not as good in the end game, as there are better dodge rings out there, but if you haven't found any of the better dodge rings yet, then this one will do just fine. The mold ring is also going into C tier, as it's got a really good crit chance, but there are other rings that are almost as good as the mold ring, and they also do other things. So at this point in the game, the mold ring does get a little outclassed. However, it still has its little niches here and there. Morpha's ring is going right into A tier, as this is an excellent crit damage ring. I think it's one of the best crit damage rings in the game. It might even be the best. I don't remember. But it is just a solid ring, and you can't go wrong with extra crit damage. All right, what can I say about the Noble ring? Not much that's good, unfortunately. It's kind of a gimmick ring and really only good for healing. And I guess if you need the extra healing, wear it. But at this point in the game, it's really better to start moving to more offensive rings rather than defensive rings. The Nomad ring I'm going to put into A tier, as it's not always the best when you're in the min-maxing stage of the end game, but it is useful in so many different builds that if you don't have your best in slot yet, you can kind of slot this in as an interim ring. The Octarine ring continues to be useless. I'm sorry, I'm throwing this one into F tier, as what is the point of having both melee speed and attack speed on the same ring? It's just, you're weakening yourself overall, and attack speed just isn't that useful in the end game. I mean, it has its uses, but it is outclassed by other things at this point. Omeros ring, though, this one I'm going to throw into B tier, as it's a pretty good boss killing ring. And so if you just need a good ring to give you a boost against bosses, throw on Omeros ring, and that will help. The Astara ring is also going into B tier, as it's basically just a better version of the melting crystal ring, and at this point in the game, it's just as easy to get as the melting crystal ring for you. The Petal ring I'm throwing into B tier, because the Petal ring will be providing above 100% harvest bonus, which at this point is now a wonderful thing as you get extra stuff for it. So I am really, really glad that they changed the 100% limit on harvest chance, and that really ups the quality of this ring. All right, let's take a look at some polished rings. First, we have got the polished Glow Tulip ring, and this one right into F tier. It doesn't even provide as much glow as the unpolished version, and it adds health regen, but it adds crappy health regen. What is the point of this ring? It's just bad. The polished gold crystal ring, however, is good.
The Frogut is also cursed.
That's bad.
but you get your choice of topping.
That's good.
So the polished gold crystal ring does have a lower ranged damage, but it also adds ranged attack speed, which does make it really, really good for those slower weapons like the crossbows and the stabs. The polished golden spike ring, unlike its unpolished version, which is F tier, this one is going straight into S tier. It couldn't even be more of a polar opposite. It's got excellent crit chance, excellent crit damage, and at this point, Thorns is useful because you'll have Scarab gear. So this ring is amazing. The polished magnetic ring, however, less amazing. It's pretty much just as good as the normal magnetic ring, a little bit better, and it has explosive damage. But who cares about the explosive damage? You're wearing a bomb ring if you care about explosive damage. The polished octarine ring, I'm also throwing into D tier here because it is better than the unpolished version, especially the mining speed. The mining speed on this actually isn't that bad, but there are still other rings that have better mining speed and are just better in general. The polished swift ring is going into C tier, as adding the melee attack speed does help it, but the movement speed is lower than the unpolished version, and really if you're focusing on movement speed stuff, you're going to probably be focusing on a movement speed build, which means you're going to want the unpolished version rather than the polished version, which isn't quite as good. The Ring of Rock, I'm also going to put into C tier, as it's actually the best armor ring in general. Like, it'll provide you the most armor bonus out of any ring in the game, but that's just not as useful into endgame as you may think. Armor's good, don't get me wrong, but there are better things to be spending your ring slots on. The Ring of Sand continues to maintain its worthlessness and is going straight into F tier. Its abilities are not good, it is not worth leveling up at all, and it is a pain in the butt to get, so don't bother. The Ring of Stone is also going into C tier here, like with the Ring of Rock, its most common counterpart. It has one of the best mining rings for raw stats. However, there are some wiser choices for mining rings in the endgame rather than just sheer raw stat. The Rusted Ring is going into D tier. It kind of teeters a little bit onto F tier. In fact, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and throw the Rusted Ring into F tier, as there are several better armor rings out there, and there's just really no point to this ring. The Samhain Curse Ring is absolutely an F tier item, as there are much better ways of applying poison at this point, and the damage penalty for a maxed level Samhain ring is awful. So this ring is just, do not use it. The Seafoam Ring I'm also throwing into F tier, as fishing skill, again, just is not that useful. Maybe in the earlier game when you're struggling to get your hands on some fish and your fishing skill is low, you can use this ring to boost yourself up to a higher level type of water. But at this point in the game, when you have max fishing and you have the best fishing rods, this ring serves no purpose whatsoever. The Septum Ring I'm going to put into D tier, as it's technically the second best armor ring in the game at this point, but that doesn't say much, as again, armor's not that great and the Ring of Rock is better, so save yourself some time and use something else. The Skull Ring is also going into D tier here, as the hit point penalty actually isn't that bad, and the melee speed boost is actually really, really good. So if you're trying to get fastest melee for a build, then you might want to actually consider this ring. At this point in the game, you can take that hit point penalty. The Sky Ring is going into A tier. It is one of the best melee rings. Although sometimes I prefer pure crit or mining damage over melee damage, it's still, this ring cannot be ignored. Now the Spine Ring I'm actually going to put into D tier, as it's really only useful if you're struggling on a boss fight, and that makes it a little bit too gimmicky. But if you do need that extra damage, I do have, I think, one build that does use this, so it does serve a purpose in the end game, but it's not serving a really great purpose in the end game. The Swift Ring I am also putting into D tier because, again, it's useful for a movement speed build, but that's more of a vanity build. And so there are better things that can be used in your ring slots, but if you really want to, the Swift Ring is the highest movement speed ring in the game. The Topaz Ring deserves an A tier ranking because it is pretty much the best mining ring in general. However, at this point, you're probably going to want to consider replacing your raw mining damage rings with other things. Now, this one does provide a mining percentage, which is one of the reasons why it's better. But again, you can replace this once you get above 2,500 mining with other kinds of rings and other abilities that will focus in other areas like crit or crit chance or damage boosts, etc. The Valentine Ring is actually going to go into C tier as the hit point regeneration actually isn't that bad at this level. Now, if you really need it, it can be helpful, but at this level, you really shouldn't need the hit point regen. But if you do, take a look at this ring. It's not bad. The White Glass Ring is going into A tier as it is still the best dodge ring in the game. You want 2 of these if you're going for a dodge build. The Wild Warden Ring I'm going to put into C tier as the bonus to your damage is really nice and very versatile. However, it also provides a bonus to pet damage. And if you're using a pet that does damage, then this ring is actually more useful. But most players at this point in the game will have swapped to an Owl Lux and are using their Owl Luxes to boost themselves to just that little extra level. And as such, you don't need the damage boost of the Wild Warden Ring as much. The Wooden Ring is going into F tier as there are much better hit point rings to wear, and this ring is just awful. Ignore it. The Wooden Thorn Ring is going into D tier as it's more useful at this point in the game because if you are using a Thorns build, you could use these Thorn Rings. However, personally, I would prefer to use the Polished Crystal Spike Ring as that provides a pretty good Thorns bonus as well and does a lot more. And that wraps everything up for today's episode. If you enjoyed yourself, please be sure to hit that like button. Subscribe if you're interested in watching my videos regularly. And if you feel like adding some extra support to the channel, you can always join our Patreon or become a YouTube member. There are links in the description. Thanks again for watching. You're all wonderful, and until next time, stay crazy.